Welcome. This is going to be a short lesson on finding the domain and range of functions from the graph. So I have just 4 examples here, 4 graphs. If you look at this graph, and it has 1, 2, 3 ordered pairs, and it looks like this ordered pair is 1 and 1. This one is 2 and -1. And this one looks like it's -2 for x and 4 for y. So we have 3 ordered pairs, and that represents a function because it passes the vertical line test, not 2 dots. The vertical line doesn't pass through 2 dots at a time. So if you want to identify the domain, you always find the x values on the graph. So the x values, and it doesn't matter in what order because you're going to list them. So the domain would be -2, 1, and 2. So all these x values. And the range would be the y values associated with them. So y is 4 here, the y value is 1 here, and the y value is -1 here. So basically, if you have just ordered pairs on the graph, your domain and range will be listed using set notation. And you cannot use interval notation because the values of x for the domain in between those any 2 points, they're not connected. They're not as part of the function. The part of the function are only the ordered pairs that are shown on the graph. If we look at this second graph here, this graph looks like it's continuous because it looks like those arrows are telling me I'm going all the way up and to the left, all the way up and to the right. So this function is taking on all values of x. So as you extend this line forever, you're going to take on all x values up to -infinity, and the same here with infinity. And notice that the x values that the graph takes on, that's what the domain of the function is. And because it's continuous, I can represent the domain using interval notation. So my interval notation is all the x values covered with this graph are, they go from -infinity to infinity. So that's the domain of this function. Remember, we're focusing on the x values that the graph is associated with. The domain, the range would be the y values on the graph. And if you notice that the graph doesn't really touch any y values below the x-axis, the graph goes from the x-axis all the way up. And those arrows also tell us that it goes up for infinity as far as the y value. So this graph includes x 0 as a minimum y value, 0. So I'm going to start with 0, and 0 is included. And so I have to use brackets because I'm including 0. But it's taking on all the positive y values as well, going all the way to infinity. So that would be my range, represented in interval notation. Let's look at this graph. By the way, this graph looks like it's in a V shape. It looks like it's an absolute value function. This one looks like it's a quadratic function because it looks like a parabola, opens down. But this parabola also, with those arrows at the end, tell us that it goes down and it opens. As it goes down, it opens, and it goes to right and left, and it takes on all x values. So that's why the domain for this function is the same as the domain for this one, which will be all values of x between -infinity and infinity, while the range is taking on values from 2 to -infinity. But if I say from 2 to -infinity, if I want to write it, I should go from small to large. So I should go from -infinity all the way up to 2 if I want to use interval notation. So I'm going from -infinity for y up to 2 for y, and 2 is on the graph while -infinity is not. So this is how you find the domain and range from the graph. Remember, range, focus on y values on the graph, domain, x values. The same with this one. This graph looks like starts from for x at -6, but the -6 is not included. All numbers to the right of -6 greater than -6 are included except -6. So it looks like there's an open interval. So it takes on the x values from -6, not including -6, all the way to 7. It looks like this is at 7, and having that dot there, having that dot there means it's included. So my domain would be all numbers, and it's also continuous within this interval between -6 and 7, but -6 is not included, 7 is. So that's how I would write the domain. The range, I'm looking at the y values that the graph takes on. So I'm going from this y value looks like it's -3, but the -3 is not included because that's an open circle right there. So I'm going from -3 all the way up to here. That's where the graph ends, and it looks like it's a 4. So I'm taking on all the values between -3 and 4, and not including that -3. So I'm going from -3, which is not included, to 4, that's included. Those are the y values, which I call the range. And most mistakes that I've seen happen is that students, when they write the domain and range in interval notation, they don't write it from small to large. You want to focus on that. Make sure the interval notation goes from the small number to the large number, whether it's for the domain values of x or the range values of y. I'll see you next time.